BDEW-Kongress 2014. Podcast. Climate Policy in the United States. John Podesta, Counselor to the President of the United States. Washington, Vereinigte Staaten.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. As I was coming in, I was saying it's really quiet in this room with so many people, and I concluded that everyone was saving their voice for the football match tonight. So I hope I have as much to cheer about as you do. That's all I can say. It's an honor to be invited to speak to this important annual gathering and to share with you some of the progress the United States has made in tackling climate change and making the transition to a cleaner energy future. 1 year ago this very day, President Obama gave a major speech on climate change at Georgetown University. I think it's worth pointing out that he began, as he often does when talking about this global challenge, with the science. That burning fossil fuel releases carbon dioxide, that carbon dioxide traps heat, and that levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere are higher today than they have been in hundreds of thousands of years. The 20 warmest years on average for the planet have all occurred since 1990. 97% of scientists agree that human activity is warming the planet. Now that may all sound familiar to you, but in the United States, people contest many of those facts. So the president, I think, always begins when he's talking to the American public with trying to focus the public's attention on the challenge that we do face. And the only question President Obama said a year ago was not whether we needed to act. The overwhelming judgment of science demanded that we act. The fact that sea levels are already higher in many parts of the world and in many parts of my country than they were a century ago, that heat waves were hotter, that droughts are drier. We're experiencing that in western United States and California. Wildfires are burning more fiercely. These impacts demand that we act. The only question for the United States and the world was whether we would have the courage to take action before it was too late. I'm here to say that the United States has made great strides in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, increasing clean energy production, and improving communities' resilience to the climate change impacts that we know are coming. And we stand ready to work with Germany and other countries to continue to raise international ambition to take on this global challenge. In 2009, President Obama announced a goal of reducing U.S. greenhouse gas emissions in the range of 17% below 2005 levels by 2020. We're well on our way to achieving that goal. Today, the United States generates more clean energy than ever before, building on investments made in the Recovery Act, which passed at the beginning of the Obama administration. We've tripled electricity generation from wind since 2008, and we've increased solar generation by tenfold. Every 4 minutes, another American home or business is going solar, as you've experienced here in Germany. Under the Climate Action Plan that the President announced that, as I said, a year ago today, he announced steps to help the United States double its renewable energy generation again. The Interior Department is on track to approve enough renewable energy capacity on private lands, on public lands, to power more than 6 million homes by 2020. The Department of Defense, which is the biggest energy consumer in the United States, indeed it's the biggest, as a single entity, the biggest energy consumer in the world, will install 3 gigawatts of renewable power on its bases in the U.S. In the next 6 years. And as all of you know, the United States is also in the midst of a natural gas boom. We've surpassed Russia to become the world's leading producer of natural gas, and projections show that the U.S. will continue to lead global production through 2030. The natural gas boom is putting us, in my view, on the right path forward as we take on climate change. Electricity production fueled by natural gas throws off about half as much carbon dioxide as conventional coal power. Responsibly extracted and carefully transported natural gas can provide a credible bridge for the United States and other countries to a low-carbon, but eventually, make no mistake, a no-carbon emission energy future for the power sector. The United States is committed to developing natural gas resources and to putting in place the best methods for controlling harmful methane emissions at every stage of natural gas production, storage, transportation, and distribution. I'm working with the Secretary of Energy across all those areas to try to reduce leakage across the whole infrastructure of the natural gas system. We're cutting emissions elsewhere in our economy as well. In President Obama's first term, we passed the most stringent fuel economy standards our country has ever seen. That will come as no surprise to you in Europe, but the toughest fuel efficiency standards that the United States has ever seen. And cars and trucks will go twice as far on a gallon of gas by the middle of the next decade. We issued the first ever fuel economy standards for heavy-duty vehicles. And President Obama has instructed the Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Transportation to get work on the next generation of those heavy-duty truck standards. The fuel economy standards we put in place will cut 6 billion tons of carbon dioxide pollution and reduce U.S. oil consumption by 12 billion barrels over the lifetime of the program. And when we do consume oil, it's increasingly coming from inside the United States. In November of last year, for the first time in nearly 2 decades, the United States produced more oil domestically than we imported from overseas. Our focus on safe, responsible domestic energy production is contributing to U.S. GDP growth and creating jobs across the country. Our Council of Economic Advisors just recently did a report that noted that fully 0.2% of our overall GDP growth has come from the energy sector in the last couple of years. We've ramped up efforts to make businesses, government agencies, and homes more energy efficient. Again, it'll come as no surprise to you in Germany, but it did come as a big surprise to folks in the United States. In 2011, President Obama launched the Better Buildings Challenge, which is focused on helping America's commercial, industrial, and multifamily residential buildings become at least 20% more energy efficient by 2020. In just the last year, more than 80 new cities, school districts, retailers, manufacturing facilities, and other organizations across the United States have taken up this challenge and pledged to get that 20% efficiency by 2020. All told, these new partners have committed to improving energy efficiency across more than 1 billion square feet of real estate, building on the more than 3 billion square feet of commitments made through the lifetime of this challenge program. So by producing more clean energy, by using less dirty energy, and using less energy overall, the United States, while still a high per capita emitter, has reduced our carbon emissions since 2006 more than any other country on Earth. And we're going to do more. Earlier this month, as I'm sure you've read, the EPA delivered on the single biggest emissions reduction effort in the Climate Action Plan by releasing a proposal to limit carbon pollution from existing power plants. The electricity generation sector is the single biggest contributor to U.S. greenhouse gas emissions, releasing about 40% of the carbon dioxide emissions last year, about a third of the overall greenhouse gas emissions. The proposed limits issued by the EPA take a subnational, state-by-state approach to curbing and cutting carbon emissions from the power sector, setting limits for each state based on a state's current energy mix and their potential for achieving reductions through a wide variety of measures from that include installing controls at existing power plants, ramping up renewable generation, boosting energy efficiency, and deploying and dispatching more natural gas. All told, the EPA's plan puts the United States on track to cut carbon pollution from the power sector by 30% relative to the 2005 levels by 2030. That's more than 730 million metric tons of carbon pollution that won't be released into the atmosphere. Put another way, that's an amount equal to the annual emissions that come from 150 million cars, fully 2/3 of the United States passenger auto fleet. The EPA's plan builds on significant action already taken at the state level to cut carbon pollution, even though we have a lack of production in our U.S. Congress in terms of setting the right policies. The states have been super active in this area and also expanding cleaner energy solution. 10 states now in the United States out of our 50 states participate in market-based greenhouse gas emissions programs, and these states have achieved significant emissions reductions even while they've outperformed the U.S. economy with respect to the GDP in those states. 27 states have set energy efficiency standards or goals. 38 states have set renewable portfolio standards or goals. President Obama is committed to leading on this issue, and the American people are behind him. 7 in 10 Americans say that global warming is a serious problem. 7 in 10 say that the federal government should take action to limit carbon emissions from power plants. Of all the issues in a recent poll asking Americans where they think we can make progress protecting the environment came out on top. That, I guess, was missed by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mr. Boehner, yesterday when he announced that he was going to sue the President to stop him from taking further executive action because he claimed that that was a responsibility of the Congress. I think if the Congress was actually standing up to fulfilling their responsibility, the President might actually have an interest in having a dialogue with them. But given the fact that they've been completely stalled with respect to producing any legislation to tackle this issue, the President is committed to taking action under our existing authorities that we have, particularly with respect to the Clean Air Act. Of course, Germans have long supported such action. Germany has been a tremendous leader in deploying clean renewable energy. Earlier this month, you achieved a new world record and met half of your electricity needs from solar power. That's a huge accomplishment. I applaud you for that. I expect that we'll see you hit that target again and again and push beyond it and continue to inspire the world to invest in clean energy solutions. But we all know that no one country, not the United States, not Germany, not the EU, can meet this challenge alone. That's why President Obama and Chinese President Xi Jinping met last year in California and forged an historic agreement to work together both on climate change and in particular to work together to limit emissions of hydrofluorocarbons, HFCs, what I call a super pollutant, a particularly potent greenhouse gas. And the United States is committed to continuing the strategic and economic dialogue with China and will dedicate a considerable amount of time 2 weeks hence at a dialogue to finding solutions of our shared climate challenges. That dialogue is led by our Secretary of State, John Kerry, and he will be in Beijing to talk about how we can move forward not only in our domestic programs, but how we can partner together, as I know Germany is trying to partner with China to ensure a positive outcome in the 2015 COP in Paris. I think it's perhaps more important than ever that the United States and Germany, two of the world's most innovative and technologically savvy economies, work together to further innovative clean energy solutions and to combat climate change. That's because climate change is as much an economic challenge as it is an environmental one. And some U.S. businesses and bipartisan policymakers are coming around to that view. Yesterday, I met with a bipartisan group of leaders which had just issued a report laying out the risk climate change poses to U.S. business interests, from real estate in coastal areas that are subject to climate to sea level rise and storm surge, to the agricultural centers across the Midwest. The report further underscored the need to act now to curb greenhouse gas emissions and to build resilience to climate impacts that we can't avoid. They're already baked into the system by investing in infrastructure, modernizing building codes, using data and mapping tools to make smarter planning decisions. As part of the Climate Action Plan, the Obama administration is making investments in climate resilience across the country and partnering with private and the philanthropic sector to help communities get ready for what's coming. For instance, we recently built on the administration's long history of open data projects and launched the Climate Data Initiative by releasing more than 100 data sets, maps, and other resources on sea level rise and coastal flooding so that communities, individual businesses, and individual families can begin to think about that and plan for the future. Not only can innovators and entrepreneurs go to climate.data.gov to access that information and build new tools for the public, but we partnered with a host of companies and organizations from Google and Microsoft to the geospatial technology company Esri to the World Bank and the Rockefeller Foundation, who have all made serious commitments to make resources and platforms available for this critical work. Efforts like the Climate Data Initiative will make a difference, I think, for a few reasons. They take complex global impacts and put them squarely in the realm of the familiar by focusing on local communities. In our country, that was a necessary leap to bring the public along, to have them understand what was going to happen in the places that they actually lived, to help those communities make smarter decisions when investing in new projects, which will save money down the line. And they bring the full innovative potential of both the public and private sectors to bear on a problem that affects us all. So making that data available, which is mostly coming from the public sector, from NASA, from NOAA, from other public data resources, will, I think, empower the private sector to use that data to find affirmative applications to tackle the problem. While the Climate Data Initiative is a new project, the Obama administration is committed to working with international organizations and other governments to help improve planning and resilience to climate impact around the world, to improve forecasting, and particularly to provide public goods in the poorest countries. I want to finish my remarks today by considering the challenges facing the developing world when it comes to climate change and what we can do to boost innovative clean energy solutions in parts of the world that are still without access to modern energy. Between 2010 and 2040, more than 85% of global demand of energy is going to come from developing nations outside the OECD, driven by population growth, by economic growth, and the urgent human development need to connect more of the world's poor to modern sources of electricity. This last issue is why the Obama administration launched the Power Africa initiative. 600 million people in sub-Saharan Africa lack access to reliable electricity. That hinders human and economic development. It could lead to higher incidences of lung disease. It could lead to higher incidences of dislocation and violence as well. Under the Power Africa initiative, the United States government will partner with African governments, the private sector, and development partners to double the number of people with access to power in sub-Saharan Africa in unlocking the region's substantial wind, solar, hydropower, natural gas, and geothermal resources. And the Power Africa program is working deliberately to reach more than the 240 million people living in rural communities across the 6 initial focus countries by working beyond the grid and expanding access to off-grid, small-scale energy solutions like deployed solar power. Ensuring that every person has access to modern electricity is essential to continuing the fight to end extreme poverty around the globe. But our global climate situation is such that developing countries cannot follow the same carbon-intensive path of development that OECD nations took. We must make a concerted effort to extend access to innovative clean energy solutions while limiting incentives to pursuing carbon-intensive energy production. While coal may still be the only option in certain circumstances in the poorest countries, the United States believes that public resources from donor countries should not be used to finance commercially competitive technology in middle-income countries that are capable of attracting private sector investment. I know that Jeff Immelt was here. I'm not sure he agrees with me on this, but I think the President's committed to that, and he's talked to Chancellor Merkel on several occasions about it. Such coal plants in those middle-income countries would lock in high carbon emissions for many decades, make it harder to take on the already challenging issue of mitigating global greenhouse gas emissions. That's why President Obama called for an end to U.S. government support for public financing of coal-fired power plants overseas, except in the poorest countries or at facilities employing carbon capture and sequestration technology to reduce harmful emissions. All U.S. government agencies involved in financing energy infrastructure overseas have taken up this policy, including the Export-Import Bank, the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, OPIC, and the Treasury Department. So even as Germany is a world leader in clean energy, this country also ranks amongst the largest public funders of coal-fired power plants in developing countries. I know that the President, in his conversations with the Chancellor, has asked that Germany join the United States in ending public financing for conventional coal-fired plants overseas. It is my hope that the German government is considering how to join the U.S. and some meetings I've had here. I think at least this is a topic under serious consideration, how to join the U.S., the United Kingdom, and the Netherlands, and other countries to take this pledge. Taking on climate change is a global challenge and it will require global solutions. The United States is committed to using every tool available to us to meet that challenge. Deploying vastly more clean, renewable energy is one of the best tools we have available to us, both as industrialized nations seek to cut their greenhouse gas emissions and as developing nations look to jumpstart economic growth and continue historic progress towards ending extreme poverty around the globe. I would also add, as we're in the middle of an energy security crisis as a result of what's going on in Ukraine, as what's going on in Iraq, that this movement towards better technology, cleaner technology, more reliable technology, including creating a more open and global system for the transportation of natural gas, I think is in the interest of the United States, it's in the interest of Europe, it's in the interest of Germany, and I think that I will once again say, I think German companies and U.S. companies are at the forefront of innovation, and they ought to be at the forefront of the change and innovation in this area as well. So thank you again for inviting me. I know I speak for everyone in the administration when I say that I'm looking forward to continuing to work together to combat global climate change, to put us on a cleaner energy path, and to follow the lead that Germany has already taken in making these massive investments, and particularly in zero carbon energy. Thanks for the opportunity to be able to explain a little bit about what we're up to in the U.S. today. Thank you.
Weitere Informationen und Podcasts unter bdew.de/Kongress.